Good afternoon, everyone. Live from Silicon Valley, California. This is Success Sadhana. My name is JM, and I welcome you all to a program today where we'll discuss overcoming fear with a speaker, Vaish, a veteran Bhakti yogi, author, and former monk. We have 12 members on Zoom, and I have Shweka helping me out in managing social media today. Good afternoon, Vaish. Welcome back to another episode of Success Sadhana.
Thank you so much, JM. I'm so happy to be back here. Thanks for welcoming me in. And great to see so many familiar faces and some I may not have met before. Welcome, Sherry and Wisam. Good to see you. Kalyan, Zayla, Debbie, Sureka, welcome. Phil, welcome. Okay, gotta help me out here. Mary, can't get it. Rini.
My name, maybe it's me. I'm going to renew. My name is Maria.
Maria, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
It's easier.
Okay, yeah. Rashi, welcome. Wolf, good to see you. Naveen's here. Pratibha, Carmen, Gokul's here. Wow. Shrach, Jayesh, Pradeep, New Life Christian Fellowship is here. We've got Rashi, Pratibha, and now it's moving too fast. I can't get everybody. Welcome. Manu is here. Great. Thanks everyone for joining. So today's topic is overcoming fear. And the wisdom literatures describe the source of fear. It's nice always to be able to go back to a root cause of something, isn't it? If you've ever had an affliction, an ailment, and then nobody can diagnose it or say what caused it, it can be quite exasperating. And also, perhaps it's hard to deal with something if you don't know what's causing it. So the ancient wisdom literature called Srimad Bhagavatam puts forward this statement about fear and where it comes from. And it's simpler than I would have thought, but that's also helpful. But it says in the Sanskrit, bhayam, which is the name for fear in Sanskrit, dvitiya means to not see that we're part of one original complete whole. That is, everything emanates from the same origin. We're all interconnected. And so dvitiya means to not see that, or to see something separate, because dvi means two. So instead of seeing oneness, I'm actually seeing duality, that I'm separate from my source. Dvitiya abhinibheshata means to be absorbed in something, like really caught up in it. And syat, the word syat in Sanskrit means something arises. So what arises? Bhayam, or fear. As soon as I see myself as separate from the whole, then I become fearful. And being separated from the whole, or my consciousness being diverted from seeing my connection to the whole, also means I forget who I am. And that creates a kind of darkness, of what's ignorance, can also be pronounced ignorance, that I ignore myself because I'm ignoring my source also. I don't know the source of myself, so I take on a kind of false identity. Boy, I'm coming out with a lot of philosophy all of a sudden. Anyway, that's the that's the preface. I'm speaking from the statements of these original wisdom literatures and simply presenting their premise. And then a little later on, we'll go into the Bhagavad Gita, which is another one of the books revered all over the world. It's a non-sectarian book, just that talks about the way the universe works and our relationship with it. And I'll talk about that in relationship to fear and how to overcome it, and some practical tips. How does that sound? Okay. So One of the practices of bhakti, which is the tradition that I came in contact with back in 1973 and been following ever since, is to perform what's called kirtan. Kirtan means to use sound vibration, which we ourselves create or somebody else creates, like with your vocal cords, so that you can connect with what's called transcendental sound that actually frees the mind. And in that case, it's called mantra, because man means mind and tra means to deliver. So one of the places that fear takes place is in the mind. In fact, we conjure. The example that's often given in these ancient wisdom literatures is that if I mistake a rope to be a snake, then I'll be afraid. Have you ever been out on your porch and then you stepped on a garden hose and jumped as it was dark and maybe you thought it was a python? Maybe not here in California, not many pythons, but sometimes we mistake one thing to be another. And this is the analogy that's given. And even though it's not that thing, I become afraid and I jump out of fear. It's created by not knowing what something is. But when the sun comes up in the morning and I see the actual situation, then I'm no longer afraid. The light comes in. So that fear arose in my mind because of a mistake. So all the fear that I experience comes from a conjuring that takes place within the mind, seeing one thing and thinking it to be another. So one of the ways to deliver the mind in the practice, actually in many traditions around the world, there's this process of mantra meditation or chanting a sound that delivers the mind from this kind of quagmire that it gets into. So let's try it. There are a couple of mantras. We'll start today with the Nitai Gauranga mantra, which JM can put up on the screen. And I'm going to use a tempura, which is a drone instrument. I hope you like it. It's in middle C, so it's easy enough, I think, for all of us to follow it. And I'll chant the mantra 5 times with deep breathing. And so you get the benefit of a little pranayama and also the mantra itself. So I'll say the mantra, Nitai Gauranga. I think we lost the mantra. It somehow jumped. And then you can follow along behind muted mics if you wish. So first, sit up straight a little bit, more than you were a second ago, and then take a deep breath. And an exhalation. And then inhale. And we'll begin. Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga Nitai Gauranga. So there's 2 names here, Nitai and Gauranga. We've just spelled them out phonetically, but they're names of 2 avatars that open the heart to compassion, and to seeing our higher self. And literally, Nitai means that which always exists, always will exist. And Gauranga is a name for the avatar that freely gives the process of self-realization to everybody. So try 3 more times. Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga. Nitai Gauranga. And now we'll go to the Maha Mantra, but first there's a slide that gives a little background behind the meaning of the next mantra. So this mantra has 3 words, Hare Krishna Rama. Krish means the whole of existence. It also means attraction. Like in the word charisma. Charisma means that which is attractive. It automatically pulls the mind to us. Na, it comes from the word ananda. Ananda means bliss or happiness. It also means one who ends material suffering. Rama means enjoyment arising from spiritual experience. Actually, you experience it. That means directly. It's not theoretical. And Hare means the spiritual energy of the original conscious source, the nurturing energy that's coming from the universal mother, Hara. And here's what the mantra looks like in its entirety. So I'll do it 2 lines at a time so that we can do it with deep breathing. And if you wish to follow along, then you can just take a deep breath, and then on the exhale we'll say the mantra, and before I go into the second 2 lines we'll take another breath. And I'm exhaling and inhale. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Now just notice for a moment the vibration. Every vibration has some effect on us. The mantra is meant to uplift our consciousness. Take a couple more breaths. And we'll come back into the Zoom room. I think we're meant to do more mantra meditation somehow. So welcome back when we get there. How did you like the tempura? Could you hear it in the background?
Yes.
Wolf heard it? Yeah. It's very meditative, isn't it? The tempura. You can get the, if you want to do your mantra meditation at home with tempura, you can just go to YouTube and put in Tanpura, that's spelled Tanpura. And I usually pick a C scale, because the middle C seems to be easy enough for everybody. But there are other parts of the octave that you can pick if you wish to. So this mantra meditation, if you put on a drone sound and then practice the mantra a little bit, like pick a certain number of mantras that you can do, that you'd like to do every day before you get your day started, you'll notice that it has this centering effect. You did something deliberate to help elevate your consciousness. And since JM is stuck in the slide mode, we might as well go to the first slide if that's possible. The very first slide. So the picture today was just indicative of where fear comes from. It's kind of shadow. And how we create a shadow? Let's say you're in the sun and you turn around, then you'll see your own shadow. Shadow means the light is being blocked out. So this is the way the wisdom literatures describe bhayam, or fear. It comes from turning away from our source, or from the light. And interestingly, I wonder if anybody can guess what the solution might be. If turning away from the light is the problem, what do you think might be the solution? Let's see if anybody has any comments. Chat. Okay, turning on the light. Turn into the light. Yeah, I think that's a famous phrase. Turn towards the light. And yes, that's what the verse goes on to say, that if we turn back, and that's what really the process of yoga is. It's a system of remembering our source. Yoga means huge, or reconnecting with our source. And when we're connected to the source, then that sense of darkness disappears. Just as when we turn towards the sun and we see the light and everything's in its place. Okay, let's go to the first slide. So one of the ways that the wisdom literatures takes us out of this sense of fear, absorption in fear, is to describe how we're indestructible. So there's a great fear that I'm going to lose myself. This is spelled out in quite a bit of detail in a book called Fear of Death. And oftentimes psychologists will describe, at least in this book, the psychologist who wrote it describes that at every step in our lives, we're suppressing the feeling that at some point I'm going to lose everything that I have. And there's a sense that when life is tenuous, everything can be lost at any minute. So that causes a kind of fear, this fear of loss, fear of death. It's also fear of pain. So one of the first foundational points made by Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he gives this verse, as that which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable conscious entity called the Atma. So the Atma, sometimes in other, we call the soul, we call the self, the living entity, or the conscious entity. I like conscious entity because it indicates consciousness as different from matter. And this in that picture on the left-hand side, we can see that we have a body, and what's animating the body? It's the Atma, the consciousness. That's who we are. It's not that we have a soul or we have some energy within us, although it's that we're generating the energy. We are the source of it. We're the source of consciousness. And so that energy that we are is a different quality of energy than what our bodies and minds are made of. The body and mind is constantly in flux. Heraclitus, a philosopher of antiquity, once said that you can't step in the same river twice. So in a similar way, and why is that? Because the river's always flowing, right? It's always a different thing. So we can say by the same token that we can't breathe in the same body twice. The body's as much in flux as a river is. Perhaps it's moving slightly slower, but it is constantly changing. However, we're not. That's why you might have this experience as the body ages, you feel the same. You just notice every once in a while that the body's a certain age. Someone says, "Oh, how old are you now?" It's like, wow, how did my body get to that age? Well, I just hung around long enough. But we still think of ourselves in a similar way. The body's always changing. So what does this mean in relationship to fear? I mean, when I know that actually I'm indestructible, this gives us a base to stand on. We have somewhere to stand. We're not going to lose ourselves. All that we lose is the sense of what we think we have right now. It's always changing. And we're always losing everything that's never ours in the first place. It's just in flux. And we're attaching ourselves to it. So there's this sense of anxiety that, oh, I thought that was mine. Now it's being taken away. It's moving on. But if we understand that actually I'm stable, I always have been stable, I always will be stable. It's only my identification with the inferior energy, which is called matter. Interesting, one of my colleagues says, science is the study of matter. Bhagavad Gita is the study of what matters. So it's what's beyond, what animates the body that actually matters most, not the matter that's being animated. JM, are we perpetually stuck in this mode, or is there a possibility of making it back? I think you're on mute. I think, see if I get a message. In any case, you can keep going, and when you figure it out, please help to connect with the self-preservation instincts and survival drive among all living entities, including humans. Thank you. Yes, nice question, Wolf. It's not that while we're in a body. JM, are you writing to me so I can figure out what's going on? Or should we just, let's see. Or is it me? Okay, we're back. So let's think of the example of Socrates. He's sort of poster child for this sense that I'm not my body. When he was asked to drink hemlock because he was upsetting the status quo at the time in Rome, and they asked him to not do that, and he said, "I'm sorry, but that's how I roll." And they said, "Well, then you can't stick around here or anywhere else, so you got to drink poison and die." And the the disciples of Socrates gathered around him, and they were weeping. And he was saying, well, what are you crying for? Because actually, we don't die, just the body, we change bodies and so forth. Well, that's as Wolf is perhaps pointing out, that's a high standard to rise to be that aware that I'm unafraid at death. Although that's what the wisdom literatures ask us to do, to prepare ourselves throughout this life to actually see that I'm not my body, to live in such a way that I have that clarity. Nonetheless, there's always some sense of self-preservation. So the way that the Srimad Bhagavatam describes self-preservation, it's absolutely necessary. We have to take care of the body. It's been entrusted to us like a vehicle. You have to change the oil, right? You can't just say, well, this car is a material thing, I won't take care of it. It'll fall apart. Material things need maintenance almost constantly. And so Bhagavatam says, kamasya nindriya pritir labhu jiveta yavata. Jivasya tattva jignasya narto yashjeha karmavi. Sanskrit, which means that take care of yourself so that you can be healthy and in a balanced position. Why? So that you can use your full energy to inquire and to make spiritual advancement. So the body's utilitarian, and self-preservation is necessary, but that instinct should not become artificially inflated. In other words, a sense of I have to have more and more and more to protect myself is unreasonable, and also a community or a society that develops an exclusive fixation on just developing more and more material comfort, which is not ultimately possible, because even in the most adorned situations, we still find some inconvenience. Correct me if I'm wrong. No matter where you go or how much you try, we're going to get some inconvenience. So we have to preserve ourselves for the sake of developing spiritually. It's a kind of innate mantra that says, eat to live, don't live to eat. Eat so you can be alive and healthy, but not just so. Don't be alive just so you can eat. So, first point is the indestructibility of the self. If I see that actually I can't be burned, I can't be cut, I can't be withered away by the wind, nothing can affect me ultimately. It's only the physical body that's going through changes. So that's spiritual perspective. JM, something else just came in. Let's see.
Shashank says, while the conscious entity is indestructible, we connect to the conscious entity via the mortal entity, which does get destroyed. Once the mortal entity is destroyed, one does not have a way to connect to the conscious entity, and that generates fear. How does one overcome that fear of losing a loved one?
Yeah, by having this perspective, actually, we're the conscious entity within the body, and our loved ones are the same. So, although it's quite natural, of course, when somebody that we're attached to leaves their body, we become, we're affected. There's no doubt about it, because it's the nature of the conscious entity to be attached, to love. So we become attached, but there's a way to process it. You know, it's not somebody passed away and say, oh, no, it's no big deal. But actually, from another perspective, we understand that somebody's just changing bodies. I mean, to look at it very objectively, let's just say you have a cell phone and it stops functioning. And then, you know, like you're talking to somebody and all of a sudden it just cuts out. And because something's wrong with the hardware, it broke. So the person on the other end, once they verify it was just your phone, they're not afraid because they know you You've already, and neither are you, because you already backed up all the information, I hope, and then you just get a new hardware. So from another perspective, we can understand that as soon as the conscious living entity leaves the body, then there's another facility available. We do take much of the software with us because that's the mind. The mind is a subtle physical body, and that goes to the next gross physical body. In fact, it's what creates it. And so there we are with previous impressions that we collected from the last life or the last lives, and we're in a new physical body. Wolf says, please go ahead.
Wolf has a question: how to handle the cancer ward in children's hospital, please?
Well, oftentimes we find when we go into these dire situations, we see the spirit of the patients shining through, and we find those who are we see an aliveness there and so forth. But you go into any cancer ward, and if you're going there to serve, to help people there, let's say, then you'll be in a spirit of helping those people to feel comfortable where they are. I visited a cancer ward once from my best friend from high school, Stan Wall, who developed cancer, and it was maybe about 12 years ago. I had to drive a few hours to a place where he was a patient, and he had a terminal cancer, and everybody else there was terminal. My brother and I spent time with him, a few hours is talking, and I think that I saw that when we talked to him, he was introspective. He was at peace, partly because of our discussion too, because we were talking about the difference between the body and the self and so forth. So in any situation, we can adjust. JM? Miriam has appeared.
Miriam does more pains in life mean more growth spiritually?
Depends how we react to it. The quintessential self-help mantra is, it's not what happens to us that is what's important, it's how we react to what happens to us. So, spiritual training, like what you read about in the Bhagavad Gita, the Yoga Sutras, or any other spiritually minded book, is to take things in context. So when pains come to us in life, how do we process them? That's the important point. And if we're able to take reversals or pains that come in our lives, they can become times of growth. I was in Muir Woods not too long ago, and my friend and I were walking through, and we were looking at some of the signboards that are situated throughout the forest, and one of them was about forest fires. And it said that the Miwok Indians who used to live there used to do controlled burns, because they realized when they burned a little part of the forest, and it opened up the canopy, and there was more growth that came from the nutrients from the fire, and also more wildlife came in. And it said, the placard, that forest fires have their natural course. They get set mostly by lightning bolts. And after the burn, things open up more. So there's two kinds of pain. One is that comes to us unsought. And if we're able to deal with that, then oftentimes it takes us to another place where we can be more objective. And when we do it as a controlled burn, it means that we take on a little pain on ourselves for the sake of becoming more aware. That doesn't mean that we become torturous to the body at all. It doesn't mean that at all. But it does mean that, we take some time to control the senses, maybe delay gratification in some ways, and go out of our way to do good work for others and not just thinking about ourselves, that causes a kind of mental pain sometimes, like, oh, I'm going to do something for others. Why can't I just work for myself? This is called tapasya, or it's like a controlled burn. Thanks, Wolf. I saw that. Okay, let's see another slide. And also, after this next slide, we'll take a few verbal comments because they tend to get things really going before I burn up the whole hour, which I'm wholly capable of doing, as you know. So the next one is we're just passing through. So oftentimes a fear is fear of change. And if we understand that that's natural, everything's changing all the time. Whatever we try to hold on to and we're fearful we're going to lose it is bound to cause us that kind of pain that comes from the fear of losing something. So this is a statement that Krishna gives in the Bhagavad Gita about that. And it's accompanied by this picture, which reminds us that you can see the little effulgence that's coming from each one of those bodies, starting from the embryo, and then you see the toddler going up into youth and then into old age and so forth. It's always there. It's the constant. The body's always changing. So the statement from Gita goes like this: as the embodied conscious entity continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the conscious entity similarly passes into another body at death. A sober person is not bewildered by such a change. That's an interesting statement. It goes back to the Socrates phenomena, that a sober person, that in Sanskrit called dhira, means you're not disturbed by the changes, you're not afraid of change, because you know that what's changing is meant to change. It's always changing. You can't hold anything in place in the material world. Although we're indestructible, the material world is in flux constantly. Even as we sit here, every part of our life is changing around us. We can't stop it. So a sober person means somebody who has come to grips with reality, that I'm involved in a world that's always changing. So I'm not trying to inordinately hold on to everything and make sure that it stays the same, because I know that it won't. So if we understand that just passing through and we're able to embrace change, then that sense of fear of loss is greatly minimized. And that's the subject today, is learning how to deal with fear and live a happier life by embracing reality. Okay, there's a couple more slides, but I'm really hankering for some human interaction here. Means I need to hear some voices. If anybody like to give a reflection, that's easy enough. Rashi, thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, thank you so much. So I have a question, like sometimes fear is good, right, to get us going. So if we think in that way, will it not make us complacent, as in like, okay, it is changing, so let it be? I mean, I'm just worried on that, how to draw the line that take the fear positively.
Sure. So there's...
Take the fear. Yeah,
Oh, yeah,
sorry.
I'm sorry. I thought you were done. Go ahead.
Yeah, I'm saying take the fear positively, and where it is like, too much on us, then yes, all these things will help us. But if there is no fear, I feel that we will not be functioning, as in we will take things for granted. I mean, that's my thought. I'm not sure.
Sure. It is a motivating factor, fear. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur, one of the great teachers of bhakti of antiquity, says there's 4 main motivating factors for humans. And there's a hierarchy. I'll start at the lower end of the hierarchy. The lowest is fear. Now, even in court, if you go to a court of law, somebody offers testimony or they read the person's deposition and they say, yeah, but they were afraid of the person who was interviewing them, otherwise called duress. They were under duress, and they won't accept the testimony because it's not that reliable. So fear is a motivator, but Bhaktivinoda Thakur said it's the lowest. It's not that trustworthy, or it can motivate us, obviously, but above fear is prospect. Prospect means, what do I get out of this? So people get motivated by that. That's what gets them moving. Wake up in the morning. It's not that they're afraid, but they're saying, like, I have to get ahead. So I want something in return. I want the fruit of my work. So that's the next motivation up the scale on the levels of motivation in the hierarchy. And then the next above that is duty. Someone, okay, whatever comes, and I'm not afraid, but I'm doing it out of duty. So that, he says, is the penultimate level of motivation. But what's the top? The top is love. That I'm doing something out of love. I'm moving in the world out of love. It's not because I want anything. I'm not afraid, but I'm actually, I want to do it. It's out of an extreme sense of gratitude. Nonetheless, I think you make a really good point. Fear also can be helpful. And I'll tell you the context that it's mentioned in the wisdom literatures like Srimad Bhagavatam as being helpful. There was a boy named Prahlad. He was 5 years old, and he was in a really bad family. His father was an emperor, and Prahlad turned out to be a very saintly kid, and his father was just the opposite. So he was always trying to dissuade his son from being spiritually minded. And he was in a really bad situation. So Prahlad had given these teachings when he was under duress. And he said that the only thing I'm really afraid of is being pulled back into illusion. And he described the material world and the illusion therein as a huge machine. And it's like, if you accidentally get your finger caught in some machine with the gears moving, and it sort of pulls you in more and more, and you get ground up in the machine. So he said, I'm afraid of that. I'm afraid of falling back into illusion. So he said, this is a kind of a motivating factor, that I know how powerful the illusory nature of the world is. So I'm a little afraid of that. And that's also a healthy kind of fear. So fear can be a motivator. It's there, as it's listed in various places as being helpful, but make sure it's guided by clear understanding of what we're dealing with, so that it's not an inordinate fear or a fear that comes up out of ignorance. Did that help, Rashi?
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
You're quite welcome. Thank you for such a great question. I saw other people appreciated
Yeah.
it too.
Ritesh had a similar question. He was asking.
Fear of failure.
Yeah, fear of failure.
That's a big one, isn't it? Well, one thing I've noticed, this is just a practical tip, is to redefine what success means to you. For instance, if you're doing some work and you feel that the only way this is successful is if I get to this point, then if you don't get to that point, then you feel like you failed. But it's up to you. We make our own, we set our own goals and boundaries in our minds. So if you bring it down so that you can't fail, and you say, okay, even if I just walk out the door I attempt to do this, I'm going to do my best, but whatever happens, it's not up to me. The result is not mine. I'm going to do the very best. And whatever comes, that's fine. I'm going to redefine success as me taking the time and having the courage to go out and try this and just do it. Then you lose that sense of fear of failure, because you are able to realistically define what you can do. What can you do? What can we do? We can only do what we can do. And after that, the result isn't always up to us. But if But if we go into that unreasonable state of mind that it has to be, the outcome has to be exactly like this, then when it doesn't come, we can also fear. So lower the bar, that's helpful. Not lower the bar so that we become ineffective, but lower the bar so that you can overcome fear and keep moving. That can be really helpful.
I have one.
Yes.
Hi.
Hi, great to see you.
Thank you.
Marilia, no R at the end.
Yes. Woohoo!
I'm on a big roll here.
I have one. So
Yes.
I have a huge fear of sending a text to a person that is close to me. I won't say who. And I always fear sending her a text message because other people, we have to understand, don't perceive, don't have the same perspective as we do. And they could take something that we text and we're putting smiley faces and hearts and rainbows and all this beautiful stuff to relay a positive message. Somehow they take that and twist it all around and make it something negative. So I have a huge fear of always having this backlash. How do I overcome that? Or do I just accept the person for the way she is and just take it as it comes?
Well, each case is a little individual, but from the context you gave me, it sounds like the person is prone to that type of misunderstanding. And if that's the case, I can empathize with that because I have friends, even people that I'm very close to, who are prone to misunderstanding and also who have their own issues, and they tend to take it out on other people from time to time. And that's okay with me, as long as I do know that they can then come back to a sense of reality. So
I haven't reached that point with her yet, but your response is definitely very positive and brings me light. So
good.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's good. And a lot of times, what happens for me is when I get an opportunity to communicate with the person more thoroughly and not just through emojis and so forth, then I try to bring up my fear to them and say, when I write you things or whenever we talk, this is my experience, and I'm afraid that you might misunderstand me. If you take time to expose it to the light of day, it means your understanding and your trepidation in dealing with them, and you just are very straightforward, but in a speaking with and using nonviolent speech, then oftentimes that can clear it up. And if not, then this is something that we realize that we can't take these things personally. That's something that comes up in that book called The Four Agreements that I always appreciated. One of them is don't take anything personally. Because
So I have I have done your advice. I've done that. I've taken that step.
Yeah.
It didn't work. That person just shut down and blocked me for a while to avoid contact with me. So it feels like there's a hard wall where it comes down to that person has some healing that they need to bring into their world. And I need to just accept that. And I do take it personally because it hurts.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, we're human, and I have this big, giant heart that I don't know what to do with.
No, I can relate. It does hurt. And, any of these suggestions about how to deal with things often are more of a process than just a hard stop and say, okay, I fixed it. But it's a place to go to where you can actually process it, and think like, is it me or is it them? And oftentimes I've noticed, since I'm getting older now, that when often these things happen and I wait long enough, things change anyway. You know, people, I've had so many times when people came back and said, like, remember that thing I said or did? And I was wondering if they even knew they did it. And then they'll say, I'm really sorry for that. You know, and it's 5,
Well,
10 years later, even, you know.
So this brings me to a different, there's all kinds of quotes out there, and there's one that says something along the lines of, if you're having a difficult time with someone, maybe you need to take a look at yourself. Well, maybe sometimes it's not us.
Sure. I mean, you can look at every side of it. And sometimes it may be just the chemistry between the two of you or something like that. A lot of this is written off to karma also, you know, because maybe there's work we need to do on ourselves also. As you mentioned, that's possible too. I mean, looking at all angles is helpful.
We always have room to grow, for sure.
Yeah. Thanks, Marilia.
Thank you.
Okay. Other reflections, anything you've heard so far that's stuck in your mind that you can vocalize in the workplace you're in?
Mark, please go ahead.
Oh, Mark.
This Mark?
I mean, you just went off mute, so I thought maybe you had something to share.
Oh, yeah.
His experience of 3 years on Zoom. So we go ahead, Mark.
I think I'm not driven by fear or prospect or duty or love, but I'm driven by the desire to contribute. And I see that in other people too. And to make it more personal, you would probably not do these sessions if there were nobody showing up. You would be full of love, but you would still stop doing it. You would still have the sense of duty to do it, but you would still stop doing it because you want to contribute.
Sure. Of course, it's hypothetical because somebody always shows up. It's kind of an interesting phenomena. If you have something hopefully helpful to say, and you're doing it without a motive of even, you know, there's no profit motive or something. So somebody always shows up. It's like, wow, where'd you come from? I'm saying this from experience. You know, I started a project, or at least I was part of the beginning stages of it, and have stuck with it for many years down in the Silicon Valley area, where, you know, in the very beginning days of creating a community, I would go there to give talks live and in person at a tiny little storefront we had. And I was, frankly, I was motivated in another way, that I liked to have that venue to speak because it helped me to hear what I had to say, because I'm not saying my own realizations. I had to study for it, you know, to give the talks. And at first there were only 1 or 2 people that would show up on a regular basis. And then, you know, I just saw that more and more people come into a space where you're trying to do the right thing.
Maybe I used the wrong word. Maybe I should say self-service or selfless service. That is not covered by fear, prospect, duty, or love.
I would put it in the category of love, because, you know, when you love, then the endeavor becomes selfless, in the sense that you're doing it for the other person, not for yourself. In other words, you're thinking, oh, I want them. Like a mother's love is emblematic of pure love in this world. Mother will go out of her way. She'll stay up all night, whatever she has to do for the child, because, you know, she's not thinking about herself. If she was, she'd just like, oh, I'll just go to sleep. I'll wake up later, whatever happens. So that selflessness is born out of love. It's part of it. It's, you know, it's in that category.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks a lot, Mark. Thank you for your, as usual, insightful reflections.
But even if there's love, right? Like, you get something out of it, so there's still a prospect aspect to it because it's pleasing to you, right?
Well, isn't that paradoxical in a sense? The more you don't want something for yourself, the more you actually get out of it. And that's really the basic teaching of Bhakti Yoga. The more you're giving back out of love, the more you actually enjoy. And so you can't cheat the system. But, so if somebody's actually motivated for themselves, then they're not fully in love. You've been in love, so you know what it's like. So I'm assuming. So, it's just like, you're not thinking about yourself, you're giving, but it's so fulfilling. Everything there is complete in love. Did that make sense? I was agreeing with you, actually.
Yeah, it's just a little bit loopy, like makes a loop, right? So like that's
Well, there's a difference in making a loop and being loopy, because for me,
well,
loopy
that's
means
true.
you're
That's
nuts.
right. That's why I changed the verbiage.
Okay. Yeah. Well, yeah, there on the hierarchy, they're all interrelated, and within love, everything else is complete. That's the way that it's seen in the practice of bhakti. It's really who we are. We're really selfless givers. But when we become confused about who our self is, that's the problem. And I start giving. We always give, but who are we giving to? So I give to my full sense of self. This body isn't myself. Otherwise, I'd be able to maintain it. It's even in history, if some little placards left behind, so here sat such and such during his life, and he said this and that. In due course of time, it will be erased, and that identity that I've created here in this body will be gradually nothing. It'll be lost. But my identity as a spiritual being, that's permanent. So my point is, we love, but we extend that love in material consciousness to the body and to everything in relationship with the body. And that leads to fear. And that's what the verse I gave in the very beginning says, Bhayam dvitiya binibeshatasya. All fear arises from mistaking who we are and not actually giving our love to the right place. I think I went way far afield from what you actually said, but in any case, it gave me a jumping off point for which I will always be grateful to Zela. Zila. Thanks, Sheila.
No problem. But it's the motivation aspect, right? Love feeds back into the others, but you're not taking care of your child because you're going to get something out of it. You hope, right? It's out of love. And
Yeah,
then,
that's true. And
right?
Just like within Earth, there all the other elements are contained. So, like sound is there, fire is there, and also within love, all the other elements are there too. But they're lined up properly. Like the fear a mother has of out of love to protect the child. That's kind of an aligned fear. It's healthy. Well, JM, there's 2 minutes left. Let me show the last slide. Okay, another way that Krishna describes overcoming the fear of change is this too will pass, which is a well-known saying. And here's the verse that he gives, that Krishna speaks in the Gita. He says, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress and their disappearance in due course are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So it does overlap with the previous verse that I just said, but having this ready on one's lips and knowing that whatever kinds of upheavals are there in the world, and there seem to be some upheavals available to focus in on these days, and there always will be, because the material world's always changing, and it's full of them. So remembering that these are like winter and summer seasons, they're coming and going. I don't have to fixate on them and become overly fearful, because I know it'll pass. So a few practical ways, just remembering that you're always okay right now. And you can test yourself, like look in, even during a catastrophe, you can look in and just notice, if you can, am I okay right now? And we always are, because we're always the same as conscious living being. Just notice that what's going on is changing around me. And also, if you can develop this perspective, and I'm not saying to do it just haphazardly, but there's a wealth of spiritual literatures which describe the mechanism, how it is that everything happens for a reason, then I'm not fearful, because I know whatever's happening is happening for my ultimate good. I know that sounds cliche, and as I just mentioned, there's a lot that we can say about that in subsequent classes of how it is. Can you also please include the actual version of the text from the book? That was it.
I think it's the previous, I can share across.
Okay, yeah, sharing means caring. All right, I think that this was so many good questions and reflections today. I'm going away with a lot more than I had even imagined I would. So I'm deeply grateful for all of you for tolerating me for one whole hour today. I hope that you have a day full of creativity and insights. Yes, JM.
And also you will be on trip to India.
I'm leaving for India. Thanks for reminding me. I better get my act together here. I'm leaving for for India on Sunday morning, and I'll be back in around the 11th of November. It's something I've been doing annually for 19 years until a pandemic said you can't go anymore for a couple of years. So now I'm taking it back up again, and we'll be on a retreat for about 5 weeks.
You will be missed.
Thank you very much. I'm going to miss you too. And if there's any way that I can check back in dribs or drabs, I'm going to do it. So
I would love that.
thank you very much. In the meantime, we're planning some exciting things to happen on this channel while I'm away. And I'll be counting the days till I get to see you again or hear you again. Thank you, everybody. Which reminds me, I am taking a little trek through the Himalayas, because just one time, and I'll give a little background, the yogis in caves come out from time to time. They put their arms way high in the air when they see one another, and they try to encourage each other by calling out this phrase, Hari Bol, which means keep the transcendental vibration going. So my plan on the way home is to stop up there and see some of those yogis and walk up to them and say that. So as practice, before I go, maybe you can help me. We can try it ourselves. Hari Bol!
Haribol!
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 See you soon.
Thank you.
The doggy said